Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. Okay, I made a huge mess. I've been speaking for 5 minutes already, so I'm going to start again. Today, in this live session, we're going to be talking about something that's quite interesting. And many people don't cover this topic, but it's very, very useful in Italian, and that is alteration. So we're going to see, it sounds difficult, it's super easy, and people use it all the time. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to wait for some people to turn up, and then we're going to start. I think this session is going to be quite short, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most. We're going to be talking about alteration and how we can change the ending of some words to give some effect. Right, so let me check that everything works. All right, let me know if the audio is on, if it's good, and obviously if you can see everything. I'm sorry that we started late. I've been speaking to the microphone for 5 minutes without realizing that the stream hadn't started. So, oh well. A classic. An old-time classic. Right, let me know in the chat if you have any questions, or if you're seeing this as a recorded video, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as possible. Although today we are focusing mainly on alteration and how we can make nouns sound in a particular way, give some effects without using adjectives. It's quite interesting, and it's also very, very easy. So it's not going to take a long time today to cover this topic. I am going to quickly switch to this. All right, great. So I don't know if you've ever seen this ending, INO and ONE. These are just two examples. But as I said, yeah, one more minute and I'm going to explain it quickly, and then we can go through a bunch of exercises. I don't think there's anything complex about this topic. We're just going to see a couple of things, a couple of details, some words where people can get confused, but I think it should be pretty easy. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if it's not easy. Hello, Amedeo, Arthur. There's a few people turning up. That's really good. Tutto ok? Tutto bene? Perfect. Okay, sounds like the audio is okay. It's been validated. All right, so I'm going to begin explaining this. It's really going to take a couple of minutes, and then we can go through some exercises together. So I'm going to ask you before I actually get to write it, and anybody can pause the video if they're watching it as a video and think for themselves a little bit. It's always helpful. It's always helpful to keep it interactive and use the brain. Right, so when we talk about alteration, we're talking about nouns. Nouns are everywhere, right? It could be any entity. It could be a cat, it could be animals, it could be humans, it could be people, it could be things, objects, it could be a bottle. Anyone, head of state, a pope, everyone and everything, we have these things called nouns. Now, what do you do if you want to give a certain, if you want to paint an image with regard to, say, cat, we have this as an example in front of us. If we want to say this is a small cat, of course we can use adjectives. So the word for cat is gatto, and we can just say gatto piccolo. Un gatto piccolo. This is a small cat. Yes, in English the adjective is placed before the noun. In Italian, most often the adjective is placed after the noun, but it's the same thing. We use the adjective. In Italian, we can, of course, use the adjective in the same way as we do in many other languages, but we can also do something else. We can use alteration. We can alter the noun, in this case gatto, gatto means cat, and we can change the ending, go from o to INO, to paint the picture that the cat in question is perhaps small in size or young. Maybe it's a newborn. We don't know yet. We don't know because we need the context to clarify that. But it's just a quick way, a short way, a vague way to say small cat. So instead of gatto piccolo, we can simply go gattino, un gattino, right? So these can be equivalent. Of course, this is more precise. You are explicitly saying that it is a small cat. The other one is a little bit more context dependent. Un gattino. But if I, as a native speaker, hear un gattino, in my mind, I think of a very small cat. Or again, maybe a cat that's very young, so it's not big yet. It's not grown to its full size. So this is quite handy. Sometimes it can be a more elegant way of talking about certain things. Sometimes it can be more playful. It depends on the context. But it is definitely useful, and you will hear it many, many times. So in everyday conversation, if you go to Italy or you speak to an Italian native speaker, they will use alteration. That's guaranteed. This is more or less the entire deal. So this is what alteration means. Oh, and Mark turned up. Hi, Mark. Ciao a tutti, not ciao tutti. Ciao a tutti. So you say hi to everyone. Hi everyone is, yeah, too shorthand. Ciao tutti. Ciao. Yeah. Right. Mark said hi and he's already been told off. So, we are basically discussing alteration and the basics of it. And in its purest form, alteration is just a quick way to express an idea. So instead of adding an adjective, you just replace the ending with a slightly different one. Gattino. Gattino to mean small cat. Now the opposite is also possible. Instead of changing O with ino, we can change it to one. And now this means un gatto grande, a big cat. So there isn't anything particularly difficult to understand as far as the basic concept of it. Now, why this can be a little bit difficult sometimes is because not every single word abide by the same rule. So, for example, what do we do if we have a different gender or a different number, right? So gender and plurality. In this case, we are talking about a cat, a male cat or a generic cat in its singular form. What about if we said il gatto grande? Well, that's the same thing. What about I gatti? I gatti grandi. So the big cats. So now one also follows suit. I gattoni. So we have the same exact patterns. So alteration does vary depending on gender and number. What if it's a small cat but feminine? So a female cat. La gattina, Ina. So Ino becomes Ina. Il gattino. These are all different variations, right? The big cat female, la gattona. And this is, again, gattina, small. This is called diminutivo. And this is called accrescitivo. Do you need to remember these two words? No. This is just the different variations of alteration, right? Oh, sorry, that would be one and this ino, right? And of course, ino, ina, and one, ona. Do you guys have any questions? Because if there are no questions, if this is more or less clear, we can go ahead and look at the examples. Because I prepared a few examples as well, so that we don't have to worry too much about you know, the specific cases. So I'll give you 30 seconds to come up with the questions, and if you don't have any questions, we can just move on and go through the examples. I think the examples are going to be very good anyways. Okay, so we have a few questions. Nouns don't change gender. So okay, let's take a look. So one question is, do nouns change gender? And the other question is it now an adjective? Okay, is the word now an adjective? So these are two good questions, right? So I clearly understand the second question. The second question is, after we alter a word such as we go from gatto to gattino. Is gattino now an adjective in itself? Not really. It's still a noun. So we've basically done without an adjective. So for example, ho visto, if I can write, ho visto un gatto sulla strada. So I've seen a cat on the street, although remember in Italian this really means I saw a cat on the street. You know, it could be last year. I saw a cat on the street. This is because Italians love the present perfect, so they use it as past simple. So I saw a cat on the street. So cat, if we were to do parts of speech on this sentence, cat is a noun, right? Street is a noun. Now, if I want to say that there was a small cat on the street, I can say un gattino. Ho visto un gattino sulla strada. Now, this doesn't make it an adjective. It stays a noun. It's just an altered noun. So the person listening or the person reading the text gets the impression that the cat in question is possibly small or young, depending on the context, of course. But yeah, not a big cat. This so it stays a noun, absolutely, 100%. And with regard to the first question, do nouns change gender? Nouns always change gender. So, for example, we have to make a distinction. So, if we're talking about names like Giulio or Mary or I don't know, Jay or something, these are names, and names are just names. They don't vary. But nouns such as apple or I don't know, horse, they do change based on gender. So, for example, horse can be cavallo or cavalla, depending if it's a male horse or a female horse. Now, it is true that this is only valid for when we have animals that we can talk about in relation to their gender. So, for example, giraffe. I don't even know how to spell giraffe. There you go. There you go, giraffe. So giraffe becomes giraffa in Italian. But you cannot say giraffo talking about a male giraffe. Nobody has ever talked about a male giraffe. It's too technical. So if the animal in question is an animal that's been domesticated and that people talk about, a common animal such as a cat, a dog, a horse, then we can talk about them in relation to their gender, and we can say cavallo, cavalla. But when it comes to other animals such as, you know, a giraffe or a hippo, then it becomes very weird. So it just stays the gender is one. So it's a good question, actually. So sometimes nouns can take one or two genders, you know, male or female. Sometimes they stick to the gender that they have as primary gender. For example, giraffe is female. End of story. And a hippo would be ippopotamo, and it would just be male. And it would be very strange to hear it otherwise. But talking about things in general, talking about number, then of course they do change, right? So although this is not the question. So for example, apple, mela, and of course it can become mele if it's plural. But this is something that you probably knew already. So it's an interesting question. Yeah, when it comes to animals, things can take on different genders, of course, a bit like people, right? So yeah, but it's not an adjective. So this is important. When we go from gatto to gattino, regardless of the gender that we choose, if we can choose, right? In the case of cat, we can choose because it's a domesticated animal. Then INO, or the altered ending, follows suit with the gender in question and the number. So ho visto un gattino. I saw some cats on the street. Ho visto dei gattini. So we have a different ending based on gender and number. Right. Good questions. Are there any more questions, or we can start with the examples? I have a few examples ready. We can go through them. Some are really easy, some are not too easy. So this is why I want to tackle them. Here's a list that I prepared. Actually, how about you guys tell me? So I would like for each and every one of these to do the INO version of them. So I would like to use diminutivo on all of these words, and we'll see if we come into some kind of trouble. And maybe you can already predict. So what about the first one? Telefono. Telefono. Sometimes we use the our phones. So we actually use our phones all the time. So telefono is a very common word. If I wanted to say small phone, a small phone, a cell phone, for example, of course I could use the adjective telefono piccolo. Now this means small phone, literally. How would we achieve the same effect by altering the noun as opposed to adding an adjective? Exactly. Well done, everybody. Yeah. Telefonino. Bear in mind that telefonino is a very special word. I mean, I chose these words, these examples, for a reason. So telefonino has become part of the language. So if you say dov'è il mio telefonino? Dov'è il mio telefonino? Where is my mobile phone? So telefonino doesn't mean small phone anymore. It just means cell phone. Now, if you're talking about, I don't know, if you're telling a story and in the story there is a phone that is particularly small in size, then you could be using this. Of course, it's context dependent. Everything is context dependent. We all know that. But in everyday conversation, telefonino means cell phone. And it means cell phone because it's the altered version of the word telefono, which is phone. Right. What about scatola? And by the way, what does it mean? What's the meaning of scatola? And let's do the same thing. Let's go through the process of diminuire using the diminutivo on this. Scatola piccola is too easy for us. So after this session, we should be able to do a bit better. How can we do without using the adjective to give the same kind of effect? All right, Mark did it all. Scatolina. Haha, good attempts, really good. It's really good to try. By the way, scatolina is perfectly right. It's completely correct. So scatola piccola. Yeah, it's a lot of effort to pronounce in Italian, even for, and remember, the laziest people are the native speakers. There isn't any person that's lazier than a native speaker, right? So scatola piccola is okay. Scatolina, much better. Una scatolina. For example, very useful. You lost some kind of box, some kind of container, and you ask, where's my box? Dov'è la scatola? Dov'è la scatola? And someone might answer, com'è? As in, what does it look like? How is it? Help you by describing this box. And you can say, è una scatolina rossa. So now you've basically explained that the box in question is small and red in color. Now it's much easier to find. Or harder to find because it's smaller. But anyways, let's move on. So now we've done telefono. We've done scatola. Let's do signora. Yeah, so Mark has gone with signorina and everybody else. Amedeo, Arthur, signorina. Yeah. Arthur, signorina. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So this is signorina. Again, this has become part of the language. So signorina means a lady that is not married. That's the technical, it's become a technical thing, right? Just like telefonino. Telefonino also means mobile phone, a mobile. Signorina, the same thing. Signora Rossi, signorina Rossi, right? Signorina. So she could say signorina, grazie, as in I'm not married, but thank you. It's me. So perfectly correct. Ina. In this case, you have applied the same ending, but with female ending as well, taking into account that. How about signore? So this is the male version. Signore. This is a little bit more difficult because signore is not completely regular. Signore doesn't end in O, but it ends in I. So this is this makes it irregular. However, it is a male word, a male noun. So this is the trick. Signore can actually mean two different things. It could be the plural of signora. This is a bit confusing. Signore can be the plural form of the word signora, or it could also be Mr. Signore, the male version of signora. So it can be the male version or the plural version. Very, very confusing. I assumed in this case, in my mind at least, this was the male version, but we can do both. Signorino, signorino. Yeah. So if we understand this as Mr., signore, male singular, then we go signorino. Perfect. And by the way, this is a very strange word, right? Signorino. Not strange in the sense that it's wrong, it's perfectly correct, in the sense that it's not very common. Signorino. But if we mean the plural version of signora, then it would be signorine. Okay, I'm gonna remove this though, because it just creates confusion. But it could be both depending on the context. This pane, now it should be easy given all the examples that we've already done. Pane. Pane has the same problem. Pane, we have to know in advance what it means, because it's not regular. This ends in E, and normally words in Italian end in O or A. O for male, A for female. If they end in E or I, they are plural, but this is not the plural of anything. This is a word, and it's male and it's singular. Exactly, panino. This is the correct form because pane is masculine. So we ignore the fact that there's an irregularity and we just proceed with INO, panino. Now, this is the first difficult example that we're gonna cover today. So I would like you to take a little bit of time thinking about this. We have a word that's a little bit tricky. This is a trick question. Not really a trick question, just a difficult question, I guess. And the same as the one below. They have the same issue. So try and think about the correct form for both of these. Camino, and I can tell you, camino means chimney. And fazzoletto means napkin. So, yeah. Common words. These are all very common words. All of the words in this set of examples. So, caminino or caminetto. Caminino. So we have two caminino. So I guess these are good attempts. And this is the issue about this very simple topic. So alteration is a simple topic, but in order for us to really understand it and really grasp it, we need to figure out how to behave when there are exceptions. So in Italian, there are words that end in ino already by themselves. In other words, camino doesn't come from camo. There is no word in Italian called camo. And if there is, it's not the point to acknowledge its existence now. So camo doesn't exist. Camo doesn't mean anything. And camino is a word in its own right. It comes as camino. It means chimney. So what do we do in this case? First of all, we recognize it's important to remember it. This is when it's important to have a little bit of memory in, and that's why language learning also helps with memory, because camino, you have to remember that it's a word, it means chimney. And then when we want to use diminutivo on the word camino, we cannot add another ino. It would just sound silly. Caminino. I guess we could, but we don't. In this case, we go with caminetto. And etto is a different, I guess a different form. It's a different way. And sometimes we use this. And we use it in cases such as this, where we already have INO in the word itself. So this becomes caminetto. Somebody in the chat alluded to this. Maybe it is. It is caminetto. Camo does not exist. And caminino is just a... I mean, if you use this word, it would have a comic effect. I don't think people wouldn't understand, but it's just not the word that it's used typically. Fazzoletto. Now, something very, very similar happens here. Think about what happened in the previous example and try to figure out what would happen here. Fazzoletto means napkin, and it doesn't come from fazzolo. This word does not exist, right? This is just a word that doesn't exist. I don't want you to write it down and remember it. It doesn't exist. So fazzoletto is already a word in its own right. How do we go from this to a small? Fazzoletto piccolo. How do we achieve that? So fazzolino doesn't work. Fazzolino doesn't work. So this is funny. So Arthur said, "Bravo, Mark." Fazzolino is a good. I'm going to explain why it's a good try, but it's actually fazzolettino. Fazzolettinino. No. These are good examples, but fazzolettino is the one that's correct. And why is it correct? So fazzolino would basically get rid of some of the word, right? So if this was the word, if the word was fazzolo or fazzolo, then fazzolino would make sense. Fazzolettinino, that's just too long. It would basically have the same issue as caminino. It would have a repetition that would make native speakers struggle to pronounce it. Fazzoletto. Now, when we had camino, what we did was we added etto instead of ino. This word, it so happens that it ends in etto. So what do? We just add ino. Fazzolettino. And by the way, this is not, you're not going to find this word in the Bible or any important text. The point here is not to get the word right or get the word wrong, but it is to understand how this effect occurs in Italian in the majority of the words, and then how some exceptions are treated, are handled, right? So this is the version that we're going to go with. So we are adding INO again, right? We're adding INO again. Animale. Oh, animale is actually quite simple, so I don't know why I added it here. So we have a simple one, and then we have two more difficult ones later on. So this is the last easy one to do. I would like you to try this one by yourself. So we want to transform this word that means animal, animale, and we want to use alteration to say something like animale piccolo. We want to basically convey the idea that this animal is small. And this is very powerful because we can use this alteration every time we tell a story. And by the way, we're about to finish the session. My God, it's always we always take longer than we originally planned for, but I guess that's okay. Animalino, animalino, animalino. 100% correct. That's exact. Animalino. Animalino or animaletto. Animalino, animaletto. They're both okay. Again, you see the problem and the good and the positives and the negatives of this is basically the same thing, right? So we're dealing with adding effects to words. So nothing is very official. I mean, very few of these words you would find in text or, scientific text or essays. You wouldn't use these words for an essay at uni, for example. But we don't want to become professors today. Today we want to speak like native speakers. And these are words that are used, and these are effects that are applied to words in Italian every day. So let's not get lost in the details now. Is animalino acceptable? Animaletto? I mean, these are effects on words. So the more we use them and the more we hear them being used, and the more our library in our mind is going to inform us as to whether something is very weird or not so weird, acceptable, less acceptable, and sometimes it's useful one way or the other. Let's focus on this last two words, caso and cane. Animaletto, you see, animalino tells me that it's completely incorrect. I'm just going to put it in parens here. Caso. These are the last two, and as I said, these are actually quite difficult. So I'm going to use the red color for them. Casetto, casino. Okay, so this is completely a trick question. There's no way that you could have got this right. I'm such a good person. So this is to teach you a lesson. caso. Some words do not have alteration. Why? Because there is a word in Italian called caso. It means chance, right? Ho incontrato Alma per caso. Ho incontrato. I met yesterday. Alma is a name. Per caso, by chance. I met her, I bumped into her by accident. I didn't plan to meet her, but we did. So, caso is chance. It's a word that exists in Italian. Now, what about putting the INO ending to it? First of all, what's the point? I mean, is there a small chance, so we put INO? Okay. We do it, and we end up with another word, casino. Casino is a word that is, basically it means a mess, a bloody mess, right? It's almost like a swear word. It's not, again, you wouldn't find this in books. Casino, or you would find it in certain books, I guess. It means mess. So here is the issue. Caso is a word that exists, and casino is a word that also exists. And this is not the same as casino, by the way. Casino would be a different word. But they both exist. So there is a problem. And the solution to that problem is that we just don't do alteration on the word caso, right? Un piccolo caso, you're not going to say casino in that sense, because you would change the meaning of the word completely. It would be confusing because there are two different words in Italian. One that is acceptable, casino, that's a completely acceptable word, and this one that, as I said, is almost like a swear word, right? It means a bloody mess, some complete chaos, and therefore you don't have alteration at all. So, yeah. I'll just put a big no there, just to remind ourselves that we cannot do it. What about cane? Same problem. So cane, we have a word called cane, which exists. This word exists, and it means dog, right? We looked at gatto at the very beginning, I think. There you go. We have the word gatto here. And now we have the word cane. Cane exists. It's an Italian word. We want to say a small dog. Canino. Doesn't work. It doesn't work because canino is also its own word. It's its own word, canino. And it's, I can't remember, well, it's basically the teeth. Some teeth are called canini, canino. The teeth that are pointy. And this means that we have a problem. So, because cane is such a common word, then there is another form that is used, and that is cagnolino. Again, this is very difficult to imagine if someone doesn't know already. So for certain words and for specific words that people use all the time, people have created different forms of the word that have the same effect. So cagnolino is a way to say small dog. So we're basically using the same ending, but this time we are changing the spelling of the word itself to make it so that we don't have a case of, we don't have a clash. We don't have a case where we have two words that have complete different meaning and same spelling. So this is the answer for this last example. Whoa, we've been live for almost an hour, and I think we've covered all the most difficult and intricate examples as well as the easiest ones at the very beginning. I think you guys have done great. Oh, Arthur says canine tooth in English. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. So cagnetto can also work. You see, this is where it gets a bit messy, is that some of these words have several variations, and it's up to everyone's freedom to just kind of choose the version that they like. I've tried to keep it so that we would have a good understanding of what's the main examples and the main trends and the main rules, and then focus on specific exceptions that come sometimes. And those exceptions sometimes don't have an explanation. You just need to learn them. Bravissimi, buona Pasqua. Buona Pasqua anche a te. Buona Pasqua a tutti. I mean, incredible that some of you guys have turned up today. It's Easter, and you could be doing anything, and you've chosen to do some Italian here with some live Italian. Really good, a good challenge, and really it means that you guys take these things seriously. It's over now. I think we can all go home happy. Let me know if you have any questions about alteration or anything related to it. And if this is over, then feel free to post it in the questions in the comments. Again, happy Easter, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Arthur, Amedeo, Mark, and I will see you all next Sunday. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. If I can